colleagues and partners, I'm Alina Maslova and I will be moderating our talks today. Welcome to the online conference Networking High Sustainable World. Today we will figure out how the sustainable product helps to achieve sustainable goals. Good news in our sustainable world. We have beautiful and practical eco-gifts, which helps to start good habits and to live a life that is good for the planet. Let's listen to Nimmity Zappert, founder of all of the good things, to figure out how eco-goods, in particular eco-gifts, help to achieve sustainable goals.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Just put that into presentation mode. Hi, everyone. Can everyone see that okay? It's got the main presentation screen, acknowledgement of country. Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Nimmity Zappert, and I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm presenting from Sydney, Australia, which is a Gadigal country of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to the traditional owners, past, present, and emerging. So this is me. I am founder of All of the Good Things, as I was introduced. I also wear another hat where I'm chair of the Fair Trade Association of Australia and New Zealand. And so I will be talking a little bit about how that has influenced what we're looking at today, which is a little bit about All of the Good Things, which I do sell eco-gifts. And specifically today, I'm going to talk a little bit about eco-goods as a way of achieving their sustainable development goals. So to start with, I thought it would be just good to take a moment to look at the sustainable development goals to remind us of what's there. I know those of you on the call probably quite familiar with them, but there are 17 of them. And I think often we brush over them as a group. And if we stop to look at each of them, there's a lot in there. The very first one is no poverty, which is probably one that I feel is, I know they're not in order of priority, but I do feel that it's a really important one. Then we go on to zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equity, clean water and sanitation. And you can read, I'm sure you can see the rest of them there. So it encompasses a huge amount. And I think one of the challenges for us as we think about how do we work on these is how do we bring this together in a way that's digestible, in a way that we can actually action things without becoming overwhelmed. So I do bring it back to something that I think many of us think about. So for me, the first thing is it's about people. All of the things that we look at in those sustainable development goals impact people. So if we bring it back to that fundamental thing about people, and it all is always linked together, and it's always a holistic piece, is planet. So we can't look at one without the other. They work together in one system. And we do need to look at those things together. But if we think about people and planet, it starts to become a little bit more achievable. But even then, where do we start? So how do we start working on all of these things in a way that, again, we can see some impact and we can actually feel that we're making progress on these goals? And so my philosophy with All of the Good Things is very much about doing what we can in everyday life to have impact. And the first part of that is actually, firstly, do no harm. And this is what we talk about when we mean being ethical. And we often think of it in the context of, particularly in regards to the goals that are specifically relating to our physical environment. We don't want to do any further harm to people or to the planet. That's got to be the absolute basis of where we start. But if we really want to move the dial, we've actually got to create positive impact. We've actually got to make change. And that's where we really want to stop and think about what actions we're taking every day, where we can actually, in addition to doing no harm, have positive impact. So something that we need to remind ourselves every day is that every single thing that we buy or consume has an impact. And we choose what that impact is. So it can be an impact that is just ensuring that we're doing no harm. It might be not doing any harm to the environment. It can be an impact that actually does more than that. So if we buy a tube of toothpaste and it's in a plastic tube, where that plastic tube goes has an impact on the world. It also has an impact on the person that made it, and it has an impact on us individually in terms of how we're using it and whether it's good for us as people. And I'm just mentioning a couple, but there are many other flow-on impacts of every choice that we make. So if we think about it in that context, we actually have a lot of power and we have a lot of influence over our world. And one of the things that we can do is, of course, buy goods that are good for the planet. And I think many of us are starting to think about this now. This picture is of one of our most popular products, is a kitchen pot scrubber that's made from coconut fibre, and it's plastic free. So that's the first thing. Let's buy things that are good for the planet. Let's try and be plastic free. Let's think about organic when we can, particularly with foodstuffs, because when we're putting pesticides into our physical environment, that's not great for us or great for the environment. Let's try and ensure that what we're doing, what we're using is either compostable or at least recyclable. And of course, if we don't need to buy something new, let's not buy something new. Let's reuse something so that we're actually minimising the impact on the planet. So that's the first thing. Let's buy goods that are good for the planet. We also want to buy goods that are good for the people that make them and buy them. And I think this is something that people find a little bit harder to digest sometimes because it's a bit more invisible to us. And it's sometimes harder to know who has made what we're buying and where has it come from. And this is where I'm very passionate about the fair trade movement. And the fair trade movement is based on the WFTO 10 principles of fair trade, which are very closely linked. And in fact, were developed around the same time as the Sustainable Development Goals. And you'll see the first one in this list is providing opportunities for disadvantaged producers. And this is where we take the idea of actually not just not doing harm, but actually how do we operate in a way that we're actually helping people that might be in poverty to find a way out of that poverty. And one of the key things is to actually, if you've got somebody working in a small community anywhere in the world, but it might be in a developing country, how do we ensure that they have access to a market for whatever it is they're making? So the mission in Australia, but the fair trade mission, is to alleviate poverty through trade. So the idea behind fair trade is that it's not a charity model. We're not giving people money in a charity context. We're actually working with them as equals. We're actually wanting to work with them as suppliers. We're wanting to provide them employment and a solid base of building their own business and treat them with the respect that we would any other supplier. We just want to have that based from a place where we're actually giving them that stable place to grow from, that enables them to build and to grow and to move themselves out of poverty. So the concept of fair trade actually does a bunch of stuff that I think is, again, sometimes a little bit invisible for us. So we support disadvantaged communities by giving them access to market for their products. This is a really important part of fair trade. But the key thing here is, and I mentioned people and planet, it's all part of one system. If we ensure people have good employment and are paid fairly and have fair working conditions, what that means is they're way less vulnerable to trafficking and to becoming involved in any kind of slavery. Their children go to school, because if the parents and adults of a family are well employed, then they don't need to have their children working in the family business. And they can often, in a lot of countries, of course, you have to pay for schooling. And also it means that they then have the capacity to focus on environmentally sustainable ways of living. So as we all know, when poverty is very extreme, if people are focused on having enough to eat and having shelter over their head, that has to be their priority. And sometimes what that might mean is if they have to choose between doing something in a good environmental way versus having enough to eat, it's not a fair comparison. We want that all to be available to them. And the best way to do that is to ensure that people have fair work and fair pay, and so that they can build a sustainable livelihood for themselves. So I just wanted to share a couple of stories of things that I have in my business, of really simple things that have this wonderful impact of helping people and helping planet. And one is the ribbon that I use on my gift boxes. And this ribbon is made from upcycled saris. Every roll of ribbon is different because it comes from a unique sari. And it's made by a group of, these are made by women in Bangladesh. They're a fair trade group. So it has a positive impact on both people and planet. We're using an upcycled material. So we're getting that beautiful reuse. It's a beautiful artisan product because it's unique and it's interesting and it looks beautiful, as well as supporting a community in Bangladesh. So it's a really great example of this working together. The second example that I give you is our brushes. So in my gift packs, we have kitchen brushes, and these are the kitchen brushes that you can see here. And we also have body brushes. So there's back brushes and face brushes and all sorts of different brushes. And these are all made from plant fiber. So you can see the darker ones I mentioned earlier are made from coconut fiber. The lighter colored ones are made from a plant called sisal fiber that's a bit softer. The beautiful thing about these brushes is that they're vegan plant fiber, so we're not using animal hair or plastic, which is way worse. So we're not getting those plastic microfibers in the water. And they're also vegan and they're organic. So basically, apart from the piece of wire, they will eventually just break down into nature when you're finished using them after a very long life. So they're a beautiful item from an environmental perspective, and they're also a beautiful quality item. And they're made by a fair trade community in Sri Lanka. So this is a fair trade community that started by just making the pot scrubbers, the very simple pot scrubbers you can see in the top corner there. And these were actually a traditional brush that the women used to use in the villages. And then working with an Australian business, developed some designs and more product lines. And they're now supporting over 200 women in a factory, including providing an on-site creche. So this is, again, is a beautiful story about we can do both. We can have an environmental impact and we can have an impact on the planet. And this is how we can think about that wonderful holistic view and way of thinking. What I really love about these brushes, about the ribbon, about the products that I sell, is that I know when I sell that brush or when you use that brush, that is having a direct impact on these women. And knowing where something's come from and actually knowing that direct positive impact that's having is such a wonderful feeling. So with all of the good things, this is really what it's all about. My goal is to make it easy for people to live what I call a good life, which is a life that is good for people and the planet. So you can see there are a few of the gifts that I have. So there's actually a whole range of stuff. And again, all of this with the aim of being good for people and the planet, not having to choose between the two. The gift boxes, for example, are all made from recycled cardboard. You can see there's some other items there, reusable hand wash, where you, instead of buying a new plastic bottle every time, you refill it with a beautiful powder. So there's lots of wonderful ways that we can work on that. So I guess that the key thing really is I come back to is first we do no harm, and then we do some good. It's a very simple idea, and that's how we achieve the Sustainable Development Goals with our everyday choices. And the really great thing is it also gives us a really good feel. It feels great. So yeah, so I'd open it up for questions, I guess.
Thank you very much, Nimmity. Maybe I have a question.
Yeah.
I think I'm curious. I wonder why do you use the model of marketplace with local trade? I mean, what advantages you as experts in this field as a professional can see during the whole the time when you're working with them? Maybe some advantages that we can't see in big places, big markets, something like that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess one of the advantages of working directly with the artisans in this fair trade space, I think that's what you're asking, is that you actually get access to some beautiful products that you wouldn't find otherwise. So for example, the ribbons, for example, this is a small group of women. They source the saris themselves and they've developed this product, and it's not something that you can buy everywhere. So it gives it a uniqueness, and it gives it a beautiful level of quality and a beauty about the product that I think the people that are buying and using the product really appreciate. So you can differentiate yourself from the mass market, I guess, by having really different, interesting artisan made things.
Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much. What difficulties in your field are they? I mean, what difficulties in the field do you have? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, well, I guess like any business, there's lots of things, lots of ups and downs can be on the way. I think, certainly during COVID, one of the big difficulties is supply, it was impossible to get supply from around the world. So that's been recently a very big challenge. And the increasing cost of freight is a huge thing at the moment. So it just means the overall cost of creating and shipping and then for the end consumer goes up. So that's a big challenge. It's a challenge that pretty much every business is facing though, but it does mean that, it impacts what you can do. I think, I guess certainly COVID had very big impacts as well on the communities. So, we're kind of protected where I am here in Australia. We were very lucky in a lot of ways that we had a good medical system and, vaccine programs and all of that. That wasn't the case everywhere in the world and still is not the case. So working with that is, the suppliers certainly had challenges. I think probably the other difficulty, for want of that, I probably think of it more as a challenge, is that explaining to people how fair trade works and why it's important and the impact. So it's, that's why this is lovely to be able to have this kind of conversation today, because I think people can become very fixated on environmental stuff, which is great. But if we're creating, for example, a beautiful environmental product, but we're not thinking about how the impact it's having on the people that are making that product, then I think we're missing something and we're not quite really looking at things in the holistic way that we need to. So getting that message across and helping people to understand the positive impact they can have with just making a few different choices is, I guess, one of the challenges. Yeah.